Hello guys, welcome back to our tutorial in Java programming. In this video, we're going to discuss about the methods and functions in Java. We're going to discuss how to declare methods and functions, how to use and call them in your program, and the benefits of using methods and functions in your program. So, a Java method is a collection of statements that are grouped together to perform an operation. So a methods do not return values back to the caller, while the function is the same as a method, but it can have a return value back to the caller. Let's start by creating an example. You can write a method or function definition anywhere inside the class, whether it is before the main or after the main. Because unlike in the other languages like C and C++, you need to define first the method definition before you can use it in the lower parts of the program. So you cannot use it before it is being declared. So as you can see, the main is also a method. That's why it's called the main method, and it is being called first by the Java compiler when we run the program. So let's create an example, basic method. So public static void, let's say it is greet, and let's output some string. So good morning. Okay, so now this is another method called greet. So the properties of it is that it is a public and it is a static, and void means it doesn't return anything, so it is a method. Now the word static, as you can see in the main, it also has an static, but for the sake of our example and to make it simple, we don't need to discuss first static. We'll go to discuss it when we reach in the topics about classes. For now, let's declare all of the methods as static, because the one we're going to call the methods is the main, which is also a static method. You cannot call a non-static method like this one inside the static method. So if you type here greet, you will have an error here, because as you can see in the description of the error, cannot make a static reference to a non-static method. So it means that this method is a non-static, so you need to define it as static before you can successfully call the greet inside the main. Now let's run this example. Okay, so we have an output here, good morning, because we called the greet. We can call a method multiple times. That is why we can shorten the code that you need to execute if that particular code will be executed multiple times, because developers hate redundancy. So that's why, for example, if you remember, we have a topic about looping. If you can print 10 hello world, we don't need to copy this and paste it here multiple times. No, we can print it using a for loop. Okay. So in that way, we also minimize the code that we need to write. That's why. Okay. So the same concept with the method. So for us to reuse some of the body of your code, we need to define it inside the method or a function. So back here, so this kind of method is a no return type, no return, and no parameters. So it means that it is a standalone. So once you called it, whatever body or statements that you have written inside that method will be executed without any outside input. So outside input is through the passing of parameters. So let's create another one. static void, let's say greet visitor, and it has a parameter of a string called name. So let's copy this greetings and append the name. Okay, so now we can call this greet visitor and then pass a name. Let's say John Doe. So if you run this example, okay, so we have the one who doesn't have parameters and the one with the parameter, and we pass a value John Doe. So when we called the greet visitor, it called the function or the method greet visitor and passed the string John Doe in the string name, and then we can use it now inside the greet visitor function. So this one, no return, but have a parameter. So we can also have a function that can return a value. Let's say public static int, it can return int. So what is the answer? So let's return 42. Okay, so this one, if a method has a return value, I now call it a function. This is now a function. So this has return but no parameter. Okay, so you can call it and assign it in the variable. Let's say int x equals to what is the answer. Then we can print the value of the x. Okay. Okay. So we call the what is the answer, and then the answer responded back to the caller because it has a keyword return. So remember that if you have a parameter or a data type other than void, it needs to return. So you need to type a return keyword and the value that you need to return. So make sure that the type that you're returning is the same as the type that you specified in the definition of the method. So it means that it cannot return a string here because you have an int. So that's why we have an error here, type mismatch. Okay, so our last example is, so it has return and parameter or a set of parameters. Let's say square this, so int number, then return num times num. So we are only squaring the value that is being passed. So let's create an output. So you can call directly a method inside the print line. So let's say the square of 2 is plus square it, then pass the value 2. Sorry, square this, not it, square this. Okay. Okay, so the square of 2 is 4. Okay, so that is the basic examples of our methods. So we have a no return type and parameters, no return but have a parameter, has return but no parameter, and has return and parameters. So you can add also a number of parameters here. So if you want to pass multiple values, like for example uh, so let's say find max int num1. You need to type the comma and then another value, and then return the necessary value. So let's compare it. If num1 is greater than num2, we can return num1. So if this one fails, it is safe to assume that we need to return the num2 since num2 is the highest. Okay, so let's test this. Num1 is equals to 10 and num2 is equals to 15. Okay, system.out.print line, the largest is find max. Then you can pass the value num1 and num2. So let's try. Okay, so the largest is 15. So what if I change this value? The largest is 20. Okay, so that is the basic examples of methods and functions. Okay, so let's create another set of examples. Let's delete it first. Okay, so I think this one, find max, we can do this by one line, I think. So using the tertiary operator. So let's say return num1 greater than num2. So if it is true, sorry, num1 greater than so if num1 is greater than num2, we can return num1, otherwise it is num2. So that's it. Okay, let's test this first. Okay, so that's correct. So what if you are looking to compare three numbers? So let's say I have another number, which is number 3, and then its value is, let's say, 18. Okay, so let's create a variable, find max, and then pass a value from find max method. Let's return the first call should be num1 and num2. So whatever the return will be compared to the num3 using the find max again, and then pass the num3, and then pass the result of the first call of find max. So whatever the return here will be passed also to the find max, and then compare it to num3. So let's check. So now we can change this and use a variable max. So it's the same 20, but if it is let's say 78. Okay, so that's why. Okay, so that is the correct value. So as you can see, you can use also the method as a parameter to the call of another method. So we use the return value of the find max as a parameter to the second call of the find max. Okay. So what if we have a problem, or we have an example. So let's say problem. Count all of the vowels inside a string. So let's say that's the problem. How to count all of the vowels inside the string. So As you may know, the vowels are A, E, I, O, and U. Okay, so whether it is uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter. So you need to count all of the vowels. So let's create a method that counts a particular vowel, or count if it is a vowel or not. So the parameter or the return type is boolean, and let's call it is vowel. So it's like asking if the character is a vowel or not. So let's create a c, a character parameter. Sorry. So we can use now the switch statement and then pass the c as parameter. So we can compare it. Case A, case uppercase A, case E, case E, case I, case I. Okay, you can copy it and then change the characters. Okay, so if all of them satisfied, so if the first case fails, then it will fall to the next case, and if it is failed also, it will fall back here and here and here, as long as there's a case. So if either one of those cases match, we can return true, but we can have a default which is false. It means that um, no none of the cases matches, so it is a return false. So let's delete this first. So let's say I have a string uh, s equals to the quick brown fox jump over the lazy dog. Okay. Okay, so let's say that is the string, and also we can loop in the string. So for int I is equals to 0, I is less than s, that length, the length of the string, and then increment the I, and then we need a variable counter, so counter is equals to 0. So if we can now use the is vowel, and then pass the parameter which is a character. So s dot char at index I. So if it is true, we can increment the counter plus plus. And then we can output. So vowel count is plus counter. Okay, so let's run this one and see. So we have 12. Is it really 12? Let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so our output is correct. So we have a 12 vowels. So that is the solution for our problem, count all the vowels inside the string. Actually, Okay, so we just covered the basics of methods and functions in Java. So if you have any questions, please feel free to comment it below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date on these tutorials. See you.